Bam.
Hi, this is Erik Kleinsmith, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
So, folks get riled up when the case breakers make claims. And now there is by the way, congratulations. I don't know what this means for you, but your project is trending and still staying as a top 10 Netflix special right now.
Yeah,
this
I think
DB Cooper, Where Are You thing.
I so wanted to get up there with Stranger Things, but there's no way you can beat that.
No, those Duffer Brothers really gifted and talented, and they get to work in the world of make believe. You have to make people believe on your end. How do you like that? I just came up with that raw.
Wow, you don't got something written down there? That's fantastic.
No. Yeah, right. So, look, I know you don't mind this, especially coming from our field as Intel guys.
Yeah.
It's our job to already be conservative in what we say is going to happen or what is happening. We don't want to get things wrong because it's about our ego. We want some rigor in this. And so you're getting some rigor thrown at you here. There's a lot of people with a lot of questions. Sure. And we can start going through Jamie and James's questions. But I wanted to give you the chance to kind of just start out, because what I really want to do is sort of debunk this special, because right about 8 minutes into episode 3, I'm like, what the fuck is this thing? It all of a sudden turns about Tom and how he's got this confirmation bias. And it's just a freight train of things to prove that.
Right.
And they never let you guys really lay out the case. I'm like, but expand on this. And then there's anyhow.
That's okay, because there's the difference is, our group, we came together to try to solve this, and whereas, and I tell you, the director, Maria Zenovich, and executive producer Peter Morgan, they were fantastic, but their job, quite honestly, is to entertain, not to solve this case. If we presented everything that we had, it would be the most boring, dry. You might as well just start reading affidavit and dossiers, for 4 episodes. And God, how exciting is that? The investigative work, like Intel work, the nuts and bolts of it is god awful boring.
Yeah,
it's painstaking, and so that's not entertaining. I mean, I even had a conversation with I'm trying to remember the actor. He's a Warriors Incorporated, Dale Dye. Okay. I had some correspondence back and forth, and there was a series I was watching called Falling Skies, and I was kind of giving him some notes. Like, look, there's nothing in Intel about this. You guys are running this series, and this is a story about aliens invading the Earth and everything else, and it's like, there's nothing about Intel. And he wrote me back, he goes, Intel's not sexy.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it can be, if you work it in, they were effectively able to do that in series like 24 hours or whatever, that was Intel heavy, Zero Dark 30 was very Intel heavy, it can be, but the nuts and bolts of some, a bunch of nugs sitting at computers, and screens looking at and doing painstaking investigation. Yeah, that's, you're reading. That nobody wants to see somebody read. So, and that's really what we're doing.
I want to jump in and say this, because a couple of times they show your link diagram, but it's a prop to show how crazy Tom is, right? And so, look, and this is for the audience. I know you know this. When you build a link diagram, you don't just go, these guys know each other because I know it. No. Yeah. It has to be verifiable, because there's a different kind of line you put between those two people,
Right. And the story behind that link diagram is, when I first started working with Tom, I was a program manager for a training program within the Army. I was training all the Army intelligence analysts.
Right.
Once they got out of Fort Huachuca. And I had a whole bevy of instructors, and one of the tools that we were using is a link diagram tool called Analyst Notebook, which really started in law enforcement and then moved into DoD, and it's still the king of network, social network, and network analysis for the analyst. And so I gave it to one of my instructors, a great guy, David D'Alessio. And the problem with Tom was having is, look, I have this 70-page dossier that I'm putting together, and I'm trying to coordinate with law enforcement. I'm trying to coordinate with the FBI field office, and this field office was out of Seattle. And coincidentally, it's the same field office and the same team that was working on missing and exploited children. So what's the priority for some old fart who may be dead, who didn't kill anybody? Yeah, he hijacked a plane, but that's really the extent of it. And so is it that important, or is it some 10-year-old girl who's been missing for a week or 48 hours or whatever?
Right.
And so Tom was really having some frustration. He's like, look, send me the dossier. And he sent it to me. And I took it down to Dave's, and he was my analyst, one of my analyst notebook instructors. And I just said, look, I need you to make this into a chart. Let's, give me a rough draft. We'll go back and forth on it. And we'll, you and I will put this thing together, and we'll try to have it make sense, like an Intel product would for any customer. And Dave comes back after about an hour and a half. He was like, I don't want to work on this. I was like, what's wrong? He's like, according to this dossier, this guy's killed people. He's on the lam. He's done, one thing after another. I was like, yeah, I forgot to tell you that. But let's go through it. And when you really look at the chart, you see that the center of the chart is not Robert Rackstraw. The center of the chart is Dick Briggs, and that's the first guy that they talked about. And this is the whole confirmation bias thing that came up. Is like, you guys got stuck on Rackstraw and you just couldn't get off of it no matter what the evidence was, A, B, and C, and here's all the reasons why. Our first suspect was Dick Briggs.
Right.
And he was he was suspect number one for 6 to 8 months before we realized that we were on the wrong track, and we changed our minds. And to have a group do that, and we were at that point, we were not, the 40 plus people that were working on this. It was just a handful of us. Tom was really, working this on his own. It was that point that, discussions with Tom is like, look, we're shifting targets, and we're shifting who we think the suspect is. That is the complete opposite of confirmation bias. And so, and the other thing to compare it is when you do when in cold case investigations, and I've sat through seminars and I've sat through police that give classes on it, and they got some these great methodologies on how to do it. And a lot of it's like, look, go over all the facts of the case again, go through all the suspects. And so but essentially what that does is it if you take that on a timeline, you're saying here's what here's what we're going to have is here's the case, here's the crime. Now let's branch off into all the different hypotheses, and let's all prove them either right or wrong, with given what evidence is available. Well, really what you're doing is you're recreating what other investigators have already done. What we did is we got this jewel of you want to call it an intel report at the tail end of it that said, this is the guy. And so what we ended up doing is our investigation approached it differently. Is that we really reverse engineered that. So we started with the one hypothesis: is this the guy? And then we worked our way back and said, we got to find a way to discount whether this is the guy or not. The first time we did with Dick Briggs, he wasn't the guy. In fact, it was like, that's not even close. He didn't even look like him. He didn't have the motive. He didn't have anything like that. And so one of the things that you're looking at is that when it switched over to Rackstraw, it became let's find these different pieces of evidence that are coming up and find ways to discount him. Were there some things that came up? Absolutely. But was there enough for the preponderance of the evidence to say that we need to shift off this guy and he's not him? No. And that's why we stuck on him. And even and I'll get to, I just saw somebody ask about Tina Mucklow.
Yeah.
One of the things that they did during the History Channel special or the History Channel documentary was they brought her on, and she couldn't identify according to the pictures 40 years later. From what we knew, she couldn't identify him 4 weeks later. I mean, it was just as a traumatic experience, and the witness accounts were not as reliable as what we thought. There's even when we compared the witness accounts to all the other suspects, suspected people, none of them were a complete match or a perfect match with any of it. And so there was always something off about the witness accounts, and then obviously lack of DNA and that kind of thing.
I want to say a couple things about eyewitness reports. When my father passed away, a guy I grew up with and I loved, and we spent years and years together. Yeah. We had aged over, I don't know, probably the last time I saw him was around 87. My dad died in 17, right? So what is that, 30 years? Man, he had to tell me his name when I saw him. And I'm great with faces and names, right?
Right.
And so when we talk about people IDing people in a moment like that, like you go into a gunfight and you're shooting rounds. I don't know how many rounds I shot. I thought I shot 5. You look and you're like, no shit, I shot 10. It's hard in these moments to have the kind of recall that we want people to have. Right. So I'm not saying that you can't have an eyewitness thing, but they're notoriously suspect. And so some of the questions in here talk about, the inability to identify Rackstraw. That may or may not prove anything, because eyewitness reports, and you've worked on Zodiac, the same thing is there too.
Oh my gosh, that is even more problematic than this one, because of the amount and the disparity of the different descriptions. But one thing we did have for Zodiac is we do have some physical evidence. I mean, we have a scar. We have, I'm trying to shift gears to this. It's a whole different investigation. But we have boot prints for the wing walker boots, as an Air Force mechanic was, the ones that were at the lake site. And then there's just a bunch of different things that we're still trying to put to rest. The neat thing about that one is that one's still open, because we're still looking at DNA, and we're still looking at, unlike Cooper, which was one case or one event, we're looking at, a dozen different ones. And it's like, is this the same guy as this one? That's really been the tough part, is linking those together, and then linking it with the individual that we think it is. And we are working with DNA. We are working with shell casings. We are working with some physical evidence, whereas even the Cooper case, there's very little. He had a half hour in the back of the plane before, wiping everything down, and he was able to, and again, they just didn't have the technology to be able to do that. So it was just, a bunch of different things that, we ended up having to look, and a lot of it turned into looking at the circumstantial evidence and just piling that together. If this was, if this was a court of law, would we be able to bring this guy to court? I don't know. I mean, I'm an intel guy. I mean, for you and me, it's like, look, here's 5 things. He's bad. Go get him.
Yeah.
And I've done work training the folks doing the prosecution cases against the Gitmo detainees. And they are, painstakingly, because they have to, imagine giving intel to a combat commander, which is life or death. Now now your customer is a lawyer, where you need to come up with mitigating exculpatory evidence as well, so that to see what the defense case comes up with. And so we were doing the same thing with this investigation, but again, it was a total, a total holistic approach to, is this the guy? So we started with his character, and we looked at all the other things. Right. And then we started with his associations. Was he in the right places? And was he in the, did he have the means? Did he have the motive? Did he have the capability? And all of those things had lined up. And that's, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, so the first episode kind of breaks that case down for the series. Second episode presents our case. And then when you get in the third episode, it's really an entire episode is really devil's advocacy against the case. Right. And so, but the good thing is both Zenovich and Morgan, they left it open. I mean, they weren't there to solve the case, and we're, I'll tell you what, I haven't made a dime off of this. Yeah. It's just been something fun to do. I got
hours full-time. How many hours going to that link diagram?
What's that?
How many work hours going to that link diagram?
Oh, that wasn't that. I mean, the guy that was working was total professional. I mean, we just did it over a couple of days with some spare time. Yeah. I mean, but again, when you see the stuff in there, again, it's most of it is telling the story of this guy's life and all the other things that he was involved with. Now that chart is 10 years old. In fact, I got it rolled up sitting here, the exact one that was in his hands. That was 10 years old. There's so much more information.
What? No, really?
Yeah. I mean, that was only after like a year and a half of investigation. We don't have the other 10 years that's in there. In fact, a chart now would be, holy cow. It would be incredible. I don't think you could really portray it on one thing, on one chart it'd just be an eyesore.
And Rackstraw's become only more and more ensnared in this thing. I'm assuming he hasn't become any less of a suspect.
Yeah. Right. No, and that's the thing is so it's not like, we firmly believe that. We also firmly believe that, other folks don't. I don't care. That doesn't bother me one bit. So it's one of those things where, there's what I didn't understand and what I know now is that it's not only are you trying to solve, were we trying to work to solve this case, because that's just what, why do you try to solve a cold case? Why? Because it's there.
Right.
But the other thing is we didn't realize it until late in the game that we were going up, the naysayers and the folks who were discounting us. I didn't understand it, but they have a vested interest in this case never being solved.
Right.
And so, I mean, there's folks that actually run podcasts, that actually run CooperCon. This is a way of life for them. And so solving the case ruins their livelihood. As disappointing as that realization is. And so there is a means for these folks to, it's very easy to say, well, Rackstraw didn't do it because of, one thing or two things that you didn't look at. And then you ask the same person, and they do this on this series, like, well, then who did it? I don't know. Well, God, that's easy. If that was the case, then anybody could do that. If you were an intel analyst, you'd be fired on the spot.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm going to naysay everything that these other intel analysts have done. So what's the answer? What's your read
on the analysis side? You'd have to give me more questions, Pete. Right. I have 55 more questions. I need more information.
Right. It'd be, and that's the thing is, like, I've trained. Good Lord, I think I've trained thousands of analysts. I trained what's his name, the spy, Chelsea Manning.
Oh yeah, right.
She was in one of my classes, and I trained her on counterterrorism analysis. But it doesn't matter who it is. It's if you had come to me and I was your boss and I said, give me a read on this. It's like, well, this is all wrong. This is all wrong. Well, what do you think it is? Well, I have no idea. You're fired.
The two. Right,
exactly.
By the way, small world. Bradley Manning and that's who he was at the time.
Right.
Worked right across the hall from me. And so there you go. It's a small world.
We're going to put his picture up in our classroom and have him as the honor graduate. Just as a joke.
Yeah, no offense to anybody on that. It's just a small world. The intel world is that small, though, right?
I've written entire articles on whistleblowing and motivations behind it. Why
you're a form of a whistleblower too. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. In fact, the guy on our team, and you see him in the series, Mark Zaid. He ran legal for us, and he's the one who filed the FOIA with the Bureau to release all the documents. Now, if they hadn't closed the case, they wouldn't have to do that. And that was one of the things, like, well, you close the case, that means you can release the info.
Right.
Mark Zaid is the same lawyer for the Ukrainian whistleblower that was involved with impeaching Donald Trump. Right. I mean, that's the type of caliber of folks that we brought into this thing. And so. And guess what? Guess how much money Mark Zaid made off of this? Nothing.
Yeah.
It's like we're just doing it because it's there. How much has Tom made? He's in the hole.
Yeah.
It's just,
I want to say this out loud too to the Finding DB Cooper dude. Man, I appreciate you commenting, and I'm going to do my best to get to a lot of comments here. But you got to give me a second here to get caught up on some of this stuff. And if you're going to post no negative stuff, then I'm going to skip those things just because there's no room to do it. I want to get to some of these questions. So. Really hit me with the hard stuff, and it's I give credit to on the computer. Yeah, well, here's the thing. All right, so I'm going to put this comment up. I've known Erik. I've worked with Erik in a combat environment, and I will tell you, you don't have to take it from me, but I'm going to tell you where he's at. His record with me is impeachable. He does not lie. He has huge character, right? So when I came to him, he used to be my commander in Bosnia, and I said, hey, I'm going to put a file in or a claim in for the VA for my time in Bosnia because I got hurt out there. He's like, all I can confirm is that you were there as a soldier. I can't confirm any injury. Right? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I would never ask you to, impeach your character on my behalf. That's the kind of guy Erik is. Erik's a straight up and down. He's not going to lie. If he thinks he sees something the way he sees it based upon his incredible skill, then I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's earned that with me. So that's the guy I'm talking to right now. You guys don't have to give me that benefit of the doubt, but I'm going to, right? So I just want to say that. And I've got no hard feelings towards Finding DB Cooper.
No, I don't care.
I know he's trying to do
he can say whatever he wants. I mean, it's none of my business, on whatever anybody else wants to do in the case. It really is. I mean, I do this on some time that's available. We're on to the next case. In fact, is when we ran into the possibility that he was flying Air America or that he was a CIA. Right. And there was one thing about the series that they said that that the claim was that he was a CIA employee. It's like we never thought he was.
No, that's right. No.
And I know the thing is I know Joanna Mendez, great gal. I mean, I've met her personally several times, especially through the Spy Museum. It was through our association there. But the one of the things she said is like, well, this guy didn't talk like CIA. That he talked like the military.
That's right.
Right. But when you're an operative, when CIA has to be associated with folks like that. I mean, downrange, we had folks running in country, and in fact, while we were in Bosnia, I just met a few years ago a team that was from the agency that was running in Tuzla at the same time, and we never met them until, in fact, it was at the Spy Museum at a social event that I met this person, and we had no idea that she had no idea I was there, and I had no idea that she was there. But it was like, holy cow, you were stone's throw from us for a year.
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
Yeah.
By the way, Mullah Omar was a stone's throw from us in Afghanistan. We never know it.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
I mean, literally, he lived right off my camp.
Well, don't even get me started on the 9/11 hijackers. That's Lord.
Let me get us back on, and I want to ask some of Jamie Hendricks' questions. He has a lot of questions based upon where can you put Robert Rackstraw during that time? Can you put him at SeaTac? Can you put him at PDX? Can you put him in Portland during Thanksgiving? Do you have anything substantial that puts him in the region? Because I know that would be a thing, right? Like, well, we lose him on this date on our route.
Right. There's several instances. We have not found an instance where we had positive ID that he was in another location other than he was in the Northern California, Southern Oregon area at the time.
Right.
I mean, and that's really the only time that all the rest of the time is time in Iran or when he was doing these other businesses and things like that in the Midwest. And those were really, he was on travel. Those are really irrelevant,
right.
The same, as that one. But and I saw the comment about the parachute strap or whatever. It was like one of the reasons why we believed it was the parachute strap is that we burned a couple threads of it. Our team did. And we got a guy on a phone who was a forensic expert and that's the first thing he said is like, hey, we think we found something. And again, this was relayed to me from Tom and some of the other guys that were there. Then he said, the first thing he said is like, hey, well, take a couple of the threads and burn them. And so they did. And he says, what did it do? It's like, it just smoldered, melted and everything. Most likely then that's the real deal, because that was, just like we had with all of our stuff in the military, you burned your threads off, they just melted. That's the way that behaved when it burned. Now, again, is that conclusive evidence? No. I mean, again, it's just one more piece that you put into the place. But it certainly wasn't a potato sack or anything like that.
But it appears that way in the documentary.
Yeah, right? It does. It's what it did.
Yeah, they also said that there were 5 materials you guys brought back, and they only showed that one.
There were 2 main. One of them we think was also part of there's a not a thermal lining, but a thermal padding system on the back of the parachute. We think we found a piece on that as well. So and that's the whole thing. And again, I see the comment about Norman D. Winter. That was never covered. His entire life or his entire time he was grifting off of this Northern California town with Connie and Pudgy Hunt. And now the great thing is that these are such a great couple. They're friends of mine on Facebook, and we chat every so often. But this is the time that this same guy was grifting off of this town by sleeping on couches, asking for freebies and that kind of thing. And so he took the name of Norman D. Winter. And, we believe that one of the reasons he took it was because, again, you see this fascination through his whole life of representing himself as a former special ops or any kind of way of high-speed, low drag. You run into folks like that all the time, and I do too all the time. It's just like, this guy's just, talking shit, and but again, so this guy took the name Norman D. Winter, and he took as a derivative of Dick Winter's name, who was the commander of the band of brothers who jumped into Normandy in Vietnam, and so that in World War II, and so that was the piece, and so he takes this time in Vietnam. As flying helicopters. He was very short time on working project left bank but he had to have a clearance to do it. And so while he was, they gave him interim, and so he could fly for a couple of weeks, and then it came back. It's like, not only this guy doesn't have a clearance, he doesn't even have this 2 college bachelor's degrees that he said he had to become a warrant officer. And so that's one of the reasons why he was tossed. And so, you've got a motive there. He's, really disgruntled because here's an organization that he's, was ready to make that a career and the best of the best. And I'm sorry, first lieutenant. And then they come back and do some high-speed low drag. We have a photo of him very late in his life where he was wearing lieutenant colonel's rank with all kinds of stolen valor medals. Yeah. I mean, thing is he had regular medals that he had earned, but then he added all this other stuff, and you just, why? It's just it's the narcissistic sociopath. It was just very self-centered. It was just very strange, to have that, late in life, and then to say, and we've got several instances where folks claim to, and witnesses that say that he claimed he was CIA several times, in different instances. Some of it was in regular police investigation. One of it was during his court trial. He didn't want to allude or give details, but he tried to say that, all the stuff that he was doing was sanctioned by the U.S. government and that kind of thing. And so again, does that prove, again, he's DB Cooper? None of it does. It just builds the case of this guy's life that really makes it an extraordinary person, and again, and builds up on the skills, the motive, the intent, and everything else. So when we were looking at this, it was just like, this episode, the hijacking episode and jumping out, that was really the pinnacle of a series of grifting operations and different scams and things that this guy had done his entire life, and all the way up until obviously when you stop and lose that vim and vigor, and you're old, and it just, that's just not part of your life anymore. Gosh, same thing happened. We think the same thing happened to Zodiac. Why did he stop killing? He got married. According, if our guy is the guy. That's, and he all of a sudden he had a family, he had a posse of young adults to, have control over, and, guide and do parenting skills, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, I mean, I hope I'm answering things as they come up.
I think you are. I mean, there's so many of them from, there's obviously a lot of passion about this, and I really, I don't want to, I don't want to blow by some of these things. I want to try to pick them out, but there's going to be more than we can get to in an hour. Right. I do have to do my job a little bit here and say, hey, I'm about to drive cross country with Save the Brave. We call it a Ride for the Brave. Myself and Scott Husing, he rides on a motorcycle. I follow him in the truck. And we raise money and awareness for veteran suicides. We're trying to stop that shit. And we're also trying to support families who end up suffering because their veteran takes their own life. This year's ride for me is dedicated to my brother who did this very thing in October. And look, it's not about weakness. It's about mental illness. And we got to help find these folks. And we're hard to fix. We don't want to deal with it. Heck, I went to my mental therapy this morning. And it kind of wrecked my whole first part of my morning, just dealing with these things. It's hard. It's not easy. Yeah. And so what we're asking everybody to do is jump in, and where you can help. If you want to come along on the ride, meet us. We'll be in, Temecula on Friday, and then Tucson, and then El Paso, Odessa, Dallas, Houston, New Orleans, Birmingham, Atlanta, and then Charleston, South Carolina is where we're going to wrap up, and then I'll drive back. But that's that. If you want to contribute, of course you can. And here is the fundraiser. I'm going to put this into the show notes. Look, if this isn't your thing, that's fine. I'm using my platform to talk about what I do. Whatever charity thing you do, and you should do something, just do it a little harder this month. That would be an honor to my brother's legacy, and a way to help somebody else who's doing whatever they're doing. I'm going to put my link for my fundraiser in here. And then if you would, gosh, I mean, is it a big deal? Can you subscribe to the show? We don't always talk about DB Cooper. Sometimes we talk about spy stuff. Tomorrow we got a really great historian talking about the first purposeful east to west trans-Pacific sailing back in the Age of Discovery in the 1600s. Really incredible story. So we do a lot of really cool stuff, not just piss off a bunch of people who are fascinated by the DB Cooper case. And by the way, I'm kin with you guys. I grew up in the town where the Zodiac killer killed, from my house where I grew up, he killed 3 people and shot another person within minutes of my house. And then Berryessa is right around the corner from me. So I am very well steeped in that case. Let's see. Let me find another question here. Let me find out where we're at here. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, Scribble Official was talking about your guys' vested interest. Everybody's vested. Can we
Right.
talk a little bit about the mission of the Case Breakers? And yeah,
Yeah.
sure, Rackstraw is your guy. And of course, look, just like anybody, like we've put the evidence together, and until we find something that doesn't
Yeah.
allow it to be Rackstraw,
Yeah.
but you guys aren't just vested. Everybody acts like this is a big gold mine for you guys. In reality, you guys are on to the next case and the next case and the next
No.
case.
Well, and the thing is, it's and again, it's really, yeah. These are one of the stuff that we're tackling is they're the one they came to Tom or they came to us. In fact, I'm the one who brought him the Zodiac case, and it came through a colleague when I was working at American Military University, one of the professors there or adjunct faculty. But you know what Tom's vision was, and it's a fantastic vision, is that you honestly have, think about if you took the energy of the folks that are really into true crime, they're really into solving this and things like that. But the one of the things that he wants to do is, if you look at the number of cold cases there are around the U.S., there's thousands of them. I mean, and there's more every year. And our law enforcement is just not budgeted to solve every case. I mean, it's just, especially with with the environment that they're in now, with the defund the police or whatever. And so what Tom's vision was to do is to start looking at folks who were retired, who may not be kicking down doors and doing that kind of thing anymore, but they have that investigative bug and they have that ability to look at this data. And again, even one of the folks within the Cooper doc said, anybody with a laptop can be an investigator. Well, it's one of the friends of both Tom and I was Shannon Rossmiller. After 9/11, she had broken her hip and was so incensed that she used her laptop to create 26 personas, taught herself Arabic, and ended up being involved in 200 counterterrorism cases in the U.S., helping the FBI catching the guy who was the dude up at Fort Lewis that was wanted to sell information about his base camp and his I'm sorry, and the secrets of the M1 tank armor. Another guy who was in the weaponization phase to blow up the Alaskan pipeline. I mean, there was all kinds of things she was doing, and she was doing it from her kitchen. I mean, and this was a former Montana judge. I think it was the youngest female judge in Montana history. And that's just what she did, and she could do it because she had her laptop. There's another great gal, Rita Katz, who wrote a book about it. Shannon Rossmiller wrote a book about it. I think it was Unexpected Patriot. That's kind of what Tom was looking at. Was there's so many folks. If we can create a team of 40 folks and we can bring in experts for whatever reason, and we had different folks working different areas, and a lot of folks only put in maybe a couple hours and that's it, and then they were done. We just had some folks look at, hey, cross level this and show me where we're making mistakes, and we had folks look at it and they never looked at it again. It's just that kind of thing. But if you could do that with volunteers and have that in every state, one of our teammates, Jen Buchholz, in fact, she's the one who brought me the Zodiac case. She's solved the case in Arkansas. That was a cold case, and now she's working on one in Texas. I mean, it's just, that's part of what she does, but besides teaching criminal justice for the school and for another college.
I want to make sure we mention, Jen's been on the show before. We bring these people on so we can dig into these things.
Right.
And also Tom has said openly, like, all these folks that are passionate about this stuff, doing all this research, quit fighting, get on board, help these case breakers out, bring your capacity. You guys are smart folks. Instead of arguing about something, bring that virality into the case, or vitality, not virality.
Right.
Don't put anything viral in the case.
Right. And again, and part of what, when you set something like that up, part of what you have to do is there has to be incredible controls, the same kind of controls that you would think in a law office or in a police investigative case. Is, hey, we got these cases, we really need to look at these and see, are any of these, and you hate to be as coarse and unemotional about it, but it's like, look, if there's no way we can case it, do we have that spark that we think there's new evidence that we can look at this case? If it's no, then even a volunteer group has limited resources, again, extremely limited resources. to do something. So you have to do a nomination process. You have to almost say, here's what I think I got in this case. I got X, Y, and Z. Let's devote some resources to it. So there has to be, God, we did this in Delta 165th. It's like, look, we only have so many assets. We need a collection manager. We need somebody who's doing the production end. I mean, I wrote a whole book about how to do that. So there's pieces to do that. And then once you've done investigation on a case, there has to be devil's advocacy. It says, look, is this the correct answer? Or are we just wasting our time or that kind of thing? Yeah. So, I mean, there's a potential out there, and you have these folks, when we had our code breaker step up and just said, look, this guy's using the same codes that we were taught in the code breaking school or the cryptologic course, in the 70s. It's the same thing. It's the same book, so it was not, once he started taking a look at it, it wasn't difficult conceptually. It was just painstakingly difficult in terms of time and effort and how long it took him to come up with what he came up with.
One of the questions that Finding DB Cooper is asking, he's talking about the personality and someone called Rackstraw sociopath. I think it was narcissistic sociopath in the show. I think it was Tom that said that.
Tom said that.
And I just want to say this about these kind of things as a spy, as someone who's done this work. If I can drop some favor, whether it's a little bit of whiskey, a little bit of cash, a little bit of whatever, to buy me some invisibility, to be a nice guy, but believe me, I don't care about that person. Yeah. Matter of fact, in our world, you can terminate somebody with prejudice, which you can make that be whatever you want it to be. Right. So if you're an operator, you might do things that appear to be very kind and generous. That doesn't mean that that's your favor. And I don't know what kind of person Rackstraw was in other cases, but if you're talking about operationally how he was acting, I wouldn't pin that on personality. But this isn't my case. This is your case, Erik. So I'll shut up.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why in Bosnia I had an entire wall locker full of liquor. Yeah. And cash money and Game Boys and everything else. I mean, we were sending it out with the teams and what you guys weren't drinking, which I found out later. But what you guys were using that to buy off individuals and get folks onto your side. I mean, that was for purely selfish reasons. It wasn't because you liked the mayor of whatever the town is. I'm trying to remember. Zavitovici was one of the towns that we were dealing with.
Zavitovici, yeah. By the way, we didn't drink our own supply really at all unless we were with us.
No, I knew that. No, I know. I just saw Yugmanovic come back. We sent him out. Our battalion sent him out to Croatia, and he was at some British Army wedding, and there was pictures came back, and it was him injecting a watermelon full of booze. So
it happens.
It's like, dude.
Okay, let's see here. Here's let's see. I talked about how Scribble was talking about the financial motive, and getting things paid for helps. But I think Tom has said number case he's digging in his own pocket to keep this thing afloat, and getting paid for hard work's not bad either. You guys are doing good work. You're trying to solve these cases. Yeah. Let's lighten up a little bit on that.
Well, no, I mean, think of it as a business. I mean, everybody's some folks are in this, for me, it's just fun to do, but some folks are in this for livelihood. I mean, it is a business or it becomes a business, and that's, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Tom's doing the same thing. I mean, he wants to make a living solving these cold cases. And these are just like I said, these are just the holy grails that garner attention. And really, it's when you talk to him Tom at length, he's like, yeah, we're pretty much done with Cooper. There's not much more to do. I mean, especially, and this is another thing, as soon as we ran into the potential that he could have been involved in the agency, we stopped. And we made a conscious decision. We are no longer looking in that area. And I don't care if we didn't care if we didn't prove that part or anything. It's, first and foremost, first thing I had to do was read them like, hey, here's classification guidance. If he was involved in an op, and depending on what it was, it's 50 years for declassification, and that's only by default unless somebody decides to hold that longer. And even the director was asking me, he says, well, then we should find out pretty soon, because from 1971, that we're at the 50-year mark. It's like no, it's 50 years at the end of his involvement and relationship, or 50 years from the next operation. So if he was doing stuff in Central America, or he became remained inoperative for several years afterwards, guess what? You got to wait until that period was over, or until they. And again, and even the government could say like, no, we're never declassifying this. That's all there is to it. But again, it's, and I'm going back to the profit motive. I mean, it's if you're an entrepreneur and this is something to that will make your livelihood, more power to you. I mean, that's great. It's great that somebody is taking this as an honorable cause, as so many dishonorable causes that folks pick up that are purely self-centered. At least this one is centered around a case that to try to solve it, or at least to foster discussion on that.
Who was James Johnson?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, it's not ringing a bell right now.
Okay. Yeah. And you got to remember, we're taking crack shots at a lot of different things. I'm gonna look at some more of Jamie's questions. Okay.
I don't even know the folks, who. There are folks that run the CooperCon or run the podcast or whatever. I never met in my life. I mean, I've never had a single discussion with them. But what piqued my interest is when, after they spent time, shutting down one or two or whatever pieces of evidence, but what I saw was all of them were on stage together. And I told Tom about it. I was like, I was told that these guys don't even get along with each other either. And there's, some significant, not personally, but just professionally, there's some there's disagreement all across the board. We're just one point of disagreement. It's just that we got a ton of evidence that has to be disagreed with if you don't believe this is the guy.
Yeah. There's a question from Jamie about Wally the and he wants to know if you guys had interviewed Wally.
Is this the pilot that had picked him up?
Yeah, I think that's so. Yeah.
We did not, because he had passed away before we even learned about him. And where we learned about it was there was a group of pilots who they were all friends. There's like 5 of them, and part of what they did in their business is they did do flights for folks, no questions asked. And we got this from from secondhand of the last surviving member. It says, look, this guy had a story, and this is the story he relayed to me, is that he's the one who picked him up, and this is the location and everything else. That story was what we used with some other information to help pinpoint where to go look for the parachute, and to go look for that, for that piece. Again, they batched that up, and God, Barbara, you are so right. Too many egos, absolutely. But that's what led them. That's why, one of the things I said and didn't make it in a documentary, but to send a team out into the wilderness with thousands and thousands of square miles of just totally unexplored whatever, and to come up with those 2 pieces was, that validated everything, that the information that we had that led up to it. There's just no way you can just go out there and just randomly pick on a map and just say, let's go look here. Right. Unless you had, some no kidding, what we would call actionable intelligence that said, here's kind of the things that led up to all this. This is probably where he came out. Let's start looking in this one pinpoint. And the kicker is, it's the only place we looked. I mean, it's not like we had teams combing the areas and we were recreating the massive manhunt that took place afterwards. We just sent one team out for a couple of days into one single pinpoint of a location to find the one needle that we think was in the haystack. And that was it.
And then you found a needle.
Yeah. Gee, it's funny. That's, and that's the thing is, at that point, that's when I started joking. I was like, look, if this guy didn't do it, OJ did it, because there's a lot of stuff that's, and we've had law enforcement tell us like we could prosecute on this one. And even, I think it's Tom Fuentes, who they had in the History Channel, before they showed that session again of saying that he didn't believe that Rackstraw was it, weeks before, he gave us a 9 out of 10 and says, yeah, this is it. So there's, unless something came up that was different, it was just, a whole different kind of different, a whole different piece of evidence that he saw that we didn't, or somebody had talked to him. That's what kind of flabbergasted Tom, and they showed it on camera, where he's just crestfallen, because he had no idea why they were all doing that.
What do you? Okay, so in the look, cryptography is an impossibly complex art. And in the documentary, it looks like the dude that did the crypto breaking is a boob, right? I'm even like, oh, come on, that stuff is so questionable. But then the response that always goes into this, and this happens in Zodiac as well, is like, you can put in SpongeBob SquarePants. Now I'm mocking them, right? But but it's not SpongeBob SquarePants. It's Rackstraw,
Right.
And here's a guy that knows. Look, I know some coding. I can speak to you right now in the S codes for surveillance, and if I wanted to communicate to you, I could put these keywords in there that you would understand what I was saying, and nobody else would, because they're just regular words, right? And you would be like, oh, I know what this dude's doing. He was in my company with me. I mean, it's the exact same thing. So I'm not saying that what he did was correct, but it does come across poorly in the documentary.
Yeah, it does, and that's, again, you're taking a snapshot, and again, it's when you're doing, and this was I think it was Rick Sherwood that was doing it. Is that when he's looking at this information, the reason why it took so long was because he was, some of the code breaking is trial and error. It's like, I'm switching this letter, okay, that doesn't work. I'm switching this letter, that didn't work. I'm switching this letter. I mean, if you look at there's a movie called The Imitation Game, which showed how the work at Bletchley Park was able to crack the enigma. That was an automated trial and error. That was painstakingly using one of the world's first computer to check, click, 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 click. That didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. That's really why it takes so long, because that was done manually. Yeah. When you're looking at that, there was another show about the Zodiac where they were trying to decipher one of the letters, and they were using some massive automation power to do that. Our same team looked at the Zodiac letters, but we were told that this is the key, and the key was the guy's name, Gary Francis Post. And once our code breaker took a look at that, his first thing he said was, just from initial look, says, if I had the key and that's the key, I could break all of these. It's just going to take it's going to take a lot of time. Right. And it was a different way of doing the code, because this guy wasn't even using letters. He's just Zodiac was using symbols and everything else. So the 26 character alphabet is out the window, and exponentially it goes up with different solutions. One of the interesting things is when they started actually breaking, and when we break the codes of the letters, the guy never revealed himself. It was just more taunts. And that's like, well, if we break these letters, the guy's going to name himself and his address and his next of kin, and it's going to be, this is why I did it and everything else. It's more like, hey, you broke my code, you broke my code, you screwheads. Well, you just wasted a whole bunch of time, and now you're never going to find me. Haha. I mean, that's really what these letters had come out to.
It's also important to say too that look, again, as someone who has been trained in this kind of work, the encoder isn't always perfect. I might make a mistake. I might get my sequence wrong or whatever it is. And even though I'm being very deliberate, it's one of those things where you could just start your way through a mistake and then send it in. And it may not always, I think it's just so complex to break these things. Right.
And that's one of the things that we did have to do when we're looking at especially the Cooper jump is there's an overlooked piece of just the logistics of being able to do it, of having that planning, of having the timing down so that he knew he could step off. I mean, nobody had GPS then. Nobody had, you don't have any indicators. You're stepping off, flying, essentially standing backwards on the lower steps, timing your jump of when you're going to leave. And that's part of the reason why he was by himself for such a long time, is we think he was probably timing it out, and this is when I need to jump. And what we believe is that he made it within 200 meters of where he was supposed to be to get picked up. And so that's, that doesn't happen with somebody just making things up overnight. And so again, does it say that this is the guy? No, but again, it's another piece that we put into place. And it's like, you have to put all these together and just say, look, I got, that fourth episode when they started talking about a comic book in Canada. I mean, it was, hey, these guys who did this painstaking work was, these guys are wrong because of, 2 or 3 things, the age of the witnesses or whatever. So, so now we think it's probably some Canadian pilot because the comic book was it. And it was like, Cooper could have read those. I'm sorry, Rackstraw could have read those. He could have been familiar. I mean, there's just there was nothing tying any of that together. And so we were just kind of scratching our heads like, man, that kind of evidence would have been tossed out immediately by our team just after a cursory look. I mean, we said, all right, let's figure out how Dan Cooper, this Canadian fighter pilot, an adventurer, could be worked in from a comic book. But after that points to nothing other than the name.
And you and I know, like, you go to a combat zone, stuff like comic books, that especially back then, that's passed around. So it's easy that there could have been some Canadian officer who left that stuff or whatever, and then all of a sudden he reads it. But that's not evidence. It's just coincidence.
Right. I mean, that's even good Lord. I mean, I'm a gamer, so I know all the history of Dungeons and Dragons and all that, but that's pre, when they thought Dungeons and Dragons was a cult, because these guys just got into it. There's comic book stores are still alive and well. I mean, so it's just that kind of thing. Like that really didn't. Even my wife was looking at it. She goes, "This makes no sense, this last episode." And it's like, well, a lot of it doesn't.
Yeah, I'm telling you, 8 minutes into the third episode, I'm like, wait a second, where are we going here? I want to say this too, because one of the other things was, anybody could have done this with like airborne training, and that's not true. So I'm just going to.
I don't believe so.
Airborne training is very simple school. It's static line jumps, and you're not special when you've done that. Being able to fly, understand stall speeds. This is a very limited. I would say in that time in the military, not that many people that could do all of those things, that could physically pull that stuff off.
No, and I can't remember when they switched. I mean, I went through jump school when I was 18 years old in 1985, and and that was my only. I've never jumped since. They call it I'm a 5-jump chump.
5-jump chump,
yeah, and that's it. So that's all that was. That was part of my. I was after my freshman year in ROTC, but that wasn't enough to do anything. That was just to have confidence in the aircraft that you could hook up, shuffle yourself to the door, jump out, and they say every night was a night jump for some of us because we had our eyes closed. I mean, that's just that's just the way it was.
The just thing is
nothing happened.
When you land in that wilderness, the Northwest, for folks who don't live up there, they don't understand how big and complicated that area is.
Oh yeah,
surviving that bit of nature in Thanksgiving time frame.
Yeah.
That's special skills. Yeah. That's not something you take on lightly because you will die of exposure.
Right.
Sure.
That's the thing. And that's the time. That's why the time case is important.
Breaking your ankle is a real outcome in that case. If you jump out of that back of that airplane that time of night with all those trees.
Right. Exactly. I mean, but again, that's the thing is, you had to plan that to nth detail. I don't think anybody who was smart enough to pull that off would have been dumb enough to say that, okay, at this point, I'm going to hurl myself into the Northern California wilderness and try not to die either before or after I land.
Yeah.
That you have to have that, completely planned out before you do anything. No operation ever suffered from over planning. Well, there is some cases, but yeah, nobody really screwed themselves up by doing due diligence on, am I going to die doing this? So why am I doing it?
Right.
It's
one of the questions. It's interesting, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. It may not be evidential, but why break off 25% of the money that you got? Is there a payout? Why throw that into the forest? Why not just throw enough to get away with it?
Right. That's that's part. It's one of those things where it's like now you're getting into the thought process of this guy, and once you're dealing with, you see what an eccentric character is. Once you're dealing with somebody, and I don't want to call them abnormal personality or whatever, but as soon as you do that, the logic streams that you're used to dealing with, especially when and you've done this with your work, once those realms have been broken, the rules are out the window for any kind of thought process, motivation, goals, objectives of what this guy was trying to work on. So why it was 50K, good Lord. I mean, that's, that is a peculiar piece. Why was it just 5,000 that was showed up on the beach?
Yeah.
And then, oh, by the way, even though the money was deteriorated, why were the rubber bands and still in great shape?
Yeah.
And that's why one of the reasons why our team was disinvited from CooperCon, because the child, or the 50th anniversary, is we were told that the child that discovered it was one of the guest speakers, and he said he wouldn't come unless our team was not invited.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, why, if we would have gone up there, it would not have been a good, it would not have been a good time for anybody, because it's, who wants a team to come up there and say, hey, you know what, there's really no reason why I have Cooper County anymore. We solved the case.
Right.
I mean, we wouldn't do that, but still, that's in essence what you're bringing up. I mean, we've had even for the crime con, some of the other work that that Jen Buchholz has been doing. They didn't want her to talk about it because the folks who ran CrimeCon didn't want to get sued because it was, the person's still alive.
Yeah.
These cases that we're doing, the Zodiac, this Hoffa tip-off, which, good Lord, don't even get me started on that one. That one's out there. I mean, I'll truly say that one's out there. These are no longer really cold cases. They're historical cases. And that's really what you're doing, is we're debating over what happened in history now at this point, because there's almost, very little new. There's going to be no forensic evidence. Nobody's memories are going to get any better. Nothing's going to appear. That even deathbed confessions, nobody believes them anymore. Even some of the other guys, it's just, hey, this guy said it to his daughter-in-law or whatever, that he was Cooper just before he died. Immediately, no, God, no. Everybody, and this is even before we're on the case. And I didn't spend much time paying attention to Cooper, growing up or anything else, but. As soon as you see something like that in the news, you're like, no, God, no. I mean, half of the comments on any of these stories have to do with Loki, for crying out loud.
Yeah. So here's a good one here. Rackstraw, if you wrote these letters, there should be some, well, look, they're old, but should be some trace DNA on those things, but who knows how many people touched them back then too. Right.
Well, we do know that for, I think, majority of them, that where they are mailed within 50 miles of one of the places he was living at the time. But again, it's, there's that doesn't count them, but again, it doesn't discount them. So that's, again, when we were going through this investigation, we were looking for things to discount them. And again, you look at, hey, what about mailing the letters? We did the same thing with Zodiac. It's like, right. Well, that, we couldn't prove that was him. There's no piece of evidence that we had that proved that was him. That's some, that's when you get into DNA and some really, no kidding, hard and fast evidence. Even with the Zodiac killer, it's like, do we have him in all the locations where the crimes were committed? Yes. Guess what? We can't disprove him because of that. Let's move on to the next thing. And so again, it's just a different way of taking the approach that you have to take on it.
And the other thing is that question of, if not him, then who lived within 50 miles of DB Cooper or of Rackstraw?
That's why we were joking. It's like, look, if he didn't do it, OJ did it. I mean, it's just like, he probably got up there and did it. I mean, who knows? That's the thing. It's like we never reached the point. We did with Dick Briggs, but we never reached a point with Rackstraw where we were just like, nope, this is the wrong guy. Never. And he never, he never denied it himself, which was, again, you could attribute that to his personality and the narcissistic piece of it. Is like, we know that he was telling folks that he was Cooper in bars for drinks and that kind of thing. Right. And he enjoyed that part. So he did enjoy the mystique and the attention to a degree until it became, holy cow, there's a team here with a camera and everything else. So
the money offer, right? That's being sold as a bribe to get him to do things. But he does have rights to this story and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we actually wanted him to be part of the story. I mean, you don't bribe somebody to do work for you. You hire somebody to do work for you.
Yeah.
And that's, it would not have been done. I saw the way that Tom did it, and it was really kind of a good, this is what you and I in the biz called cold approach.
Right.
Tom doesn't even know what to call cold approach. I had to tell him that, hey, you did hey, guess what you did with them. Yeah. And then the first day, when they showed him, before, when they were talking to him, they quite honestly, they were just trying to ask him just, some cursory questions, and it was really just to scope him out to see if he really wanted to talk at all. And that's why, when Tom approached him again, that was the cold approach. So you're running casual source. Essentially, there's a lot of the same techniques. Nobody's calling it because nobody, the folks that were out there weren't in the biz like you or I.
Yeah.
But that's essentially what it was. And again, you're not bribing them. I mean, why would you bribe somebody to become part of the investigation and to do a series of interviews and things like that? I mean, and again, what I think is the reason is because he had done so many other things. He actually said that. He was like, boy, yeah, you would like to know me. So would the FBI. So would all these other people. And I was talking to Tom right after that event, and I just said, it's because he's done so many other things. That's why he can't come forward. He's still, the last thing he wants is somebody to bring up the case about the murder of his stepdad. The last thing he wants is somebody bringing up the case of the theft of explosives, or his time, doing X, Y, and all these other things. That's why we believe that he never really wanted to come forward, because honestly, I think he would have enjoyed in the last years of his life we told him, like, look, you'll never buy another drink again. You're the one guy who got away with sticking it to the man, so to speak. So
The thing about the money thing too, like you said, he's done a lot of stuff. We may not ever find out if any of it's classified. If Pete was president, I'd be like, declassify anything on DB Cooper and release all of it, because we classify things that just don't matter that much, and anybody in the business back then is not in the business now of it.
I have folks that think everything we classified either has to do with Area 51 or the Kennedy assassination, and everything else is like, no, we classify some really, really dumb stuff. In fact, it's the first time I got on a TS level network, and I fired up my first email. The first email I got was somebody's lights were on the parking lot or something. And it was at the TS level. I was like, really? That's my introduction to this world, as a young Intel guy. So.
My first time being exposed to classified, the captain who ran the 309th, the Bravo course, comes in and he's like talking to us, and he's like, I'm going to tell you the first classified thing of your career, and we're like, oh, this is going to be awesome. It's not going to be Area 51, but it's going to be awesome. Right. And he basically says, firebugs come back to the scene because they want to see that. And we're like, that's not classified. It's not classified at all.
Wow.
It's, and like a lot of the trade craft, I can talk about S codes. It's not classified. I can even say what the S codes were, not classified. Right. But people would lose their minds if I said that.
That's true. No, it's, we were doing when I was doing instruction running this program for Army Intel analysts, one of our instructors put together an exercise purely fictitious to run these students through. It was a link analysis, or as a time event analysis chart. And one of the things that he wrote, one of the folks that took the class took it in the government. Somebody's like, hey, that's classified. And so we had to go scrub and contact every student that had been taught, even though it was totally fictitious. Yeah. And my instructor was making it up, Tony Militano, whoever you are. What he wrote happened to be classified, and so the government went bananas. We had no idea. We had no idea. That was what a pain in the butt couple of days that was, trying to track everybody down with a book and say, hey, you need to burn that page or tear that out. And it's like, why are we even telling these guys that? How about we just ignore it and let it go?
Yeah.
So, oh well. That's
some of the classified stuff is crazy. I know a warrant officer that had secret orders to go do something, and they inadvertently, because people are bad at this stuff, they classified his name. And so you're like, dude, his name is not classified. Like, come on. You can't. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. It's a bunch of dumb classified stuff. Hey, so I got you for another minute. Actually, I'm kind of past my time, but I want to ask one more question about this DB Cooper case. I like to ask this question. Like, when you look at everything, and we have all these things from all these people, and it's all been awesome. I appreciate everybody's comments. Planet X, Filmworks, Mark Delgado, everybody in there. Jamie earlier. Yeah. What is the strongest piece of evidence that makes you say, you know what, this is the top of the mountain? There's a whole lot of other stuff below that, but this is the linchpin, the link, whatever it's going to be.
I think it's him. It's the person that he fits the mold. Again, it's not there. Like I said, there was no one piece. Nobody's, to get that one piece. I mean, yeah, we got his DNA. That wasn't tough to do, but it was looking at the character. I wrote a large portion of my book on threat profiling, and threat profiling not only from individuals but entire groups, and that was the piece. Is did he fit the profile, and he fit it better than anyone that had been brought up in terms of the timing, the geography, the location, the motive, the means, the skills, the the planning, the preparation, the how it molded in with his entire the entire rest of his life. I mean, those were the things that I was looking at overall as more of a holistic picture. Because part of it was like, this case is so old, I don't have confidence that there will ever be a smoking gun on this one. And so, besides, you could say, the closest we have for physical evidence is the parachute. But again, it's tied to, a bunch of other pieces of information that have to be true if that is a piece of parachute that comes out as forensic evidence.
Do you hold out any hope that the FBI ever leans on this thing at all again, or?
No, I mean, I'm sure right now everything that has to do with DB Cooper that goes around the FBI comes with the subheader called MEGA, which is called "Make It Go Away." And and honestly, is it the FBI's interest now to deal with the historical case? Gosh, no, they got so many other things to worry about. I mean, I've talked to so many folks over the years from the Bureau or top folks from the Bureau. I understand what their mission is. I understand what their restraints are. They're just like, cops. My own brother is a 30-year Secret Service Uniform Division veteran. I mean, just the stuff that he has gone through. This is like, why are you guys, okay, you're talking about it because it's important to you and it's a cultural thing, but FBI, we're not into culture, and we really don't. Honestly, I think they could care less. And if I was in the Bureau or I was in a leadership position, I could honestly care less as well.
Yeah. There's even Zodiac questions coming in, so we'll have to do a Zodiac tune-up soon, because.
Well, I unfortunately I can't talk too much about Zodiac because
not right now. When you can,
we're still looking at different pieces on that, and it's all.
Yeah. And you guys have talked a lot about Zodiac on the show, so you guys should just
we had to we stopped for a little bit just because we're really looking hard at some physical evidence. There's some. We've gotten to the point where we've built this profile and this dossier on this individual, but now that one does have some hard evidence that we're trying to get some cooperation with some folks on. Again, it's nobody wants to toot their horn or whatever. Tom is a very serious character, and I've known him for years. We talk several times a week, and we've gotten to know each other personal, so that I consider him one of my greatest friends. So I know the character behind him, and honestly, he's a very driven and a very honest individual, and it's almost you have to admire the way he approached his life and the way he approached things, and that's why I'm surprised that the documentary even put those things in about him, because very few people even know that's kind of the background of him as well. Again, this whole Cooper series, my wife got done. She goes, "This really wasn't much about Cooper. It was about everybody that's going after him." It's like, right, because that's what's current now. Right. That's really the culture. And honestly, it's like, I'd rather have us doing this than it's fantastic we live in a country where we have the luxury to look at something like this.
Yeah,
honestly,
really is fantastic.
So
yes. The other thing I wanted to say about the FBI and police forces in general, they don't have. We think that they're like these massive institutions that have people in reserve ready to do all this extra training and all this extra money and everything else. But like there's that fun Netflix special about the Florida lottery. No, it was like the McDonald's game scam, and they had the system. Mm-hmm. If the right person gets murdered at the right time, nothing to do with that case at all, and it absorbs 2 agents, that case never gets solved. It just goes away and you never hear about it, because there's just not enough people to do it. Larry and I talked about this the other day on like, how do you make better agents? He's like, you can't make enough of them, because I want to have us running all over the countryside, learning how to speak languages and adapt in. And it's like, well, but we got to have these guys, there's just not enough people to do all these things that we want to do.
It's, you have to manage your priorities and guess who manages, and somebody else is usually setting those priorities for you. And oh, by the way, time still passes, so more crimes are committed, more people are killed, and more nefarious deeds happen, and so you can never keep up with those.
Right. And then your boss is like, what the fuck are you doing spending time on this Zodiac case or this Cooper case or this
exactly. Who they got to be, it's like, oh, who cares, let's close this case.
Yeah. Well, and let's close this show. Awesome. Seriously, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for watching. I really appreciate it. It's challenging to try to do these things and get you guys the answers that you want. I don't mind the critique. I know Erik doesn't either, but thank you all for watching. Watch other stuff too. We got all kinds of great shows coming up. Erik, anything in closing?
No, I mean, fantastic. Thanks for having me on. I mean, there's, if the stuff comes up, we'll talk about it.
I love it. I love it. Stand by.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to.